To learn about subtraction of decimals, let's take a look at a real-life example. Carlos and Sammy ran in a 30-meter race. Carlos finished the race in 6.683 seconds, and Sammy finished the race in 9.202 seconds. And in our example, we are asked to find how much more time did Sammy take to finish the race than Carlos. So in order to do this, we would need to subtract the time taken by Carlos from the time taken by Sammy, and we would need to know how to subtract decimals. Like adding decimals, subtracting decimals can be done by placing the decimals vertically or by using fractional equivalents. Let's start by looking at placing the decimals vertically and subtracting from there. So let's look at an example of 0.8 minus 0.2 is the problem that we're asked to solve, to look at the beginning of how to subtract decimals. What I want to do is I want to actually take my numbers and I want to line them up vertically. And I want to line them up so that their decimals are lined up and they're in the same place. So in this case, my 0.8, and I do need a 0 here. I always need a number here in the ones place, even if it is a 0. So put your 0, 0.8, and your 0.2 lined up with the decimals above and below one another. And that will show us too then in our answer, our decimal is going to be also lined up in that same spot. And then, since it's subtraction, I just go and I do my operations. I do my calculations, just like I would if they were whole numbers and no decimals in there at all. So I take 2 away from 8 is 6. Don't forget your decimal place. And then 0 minus 0, I just leave this 0 here. And my answer to 0.8 minus 0.2 is 0.6. This problem of subtracting decimals is a little bit more complex, but we're going to use the method of lining them up vertically and subtracting. So let's look at 2.861 minus 1.12. So I start with my 2.861 first, and then I'm going to subtract 1.12. Now notice, first of all, that I have lined up my decimal points in the two numbers, and that is also going to be in my answer where my decimal point goes. And secondly, I want to look at the fact that this number has 3 digits after the decimal place, and my second number here only has 2 digits after the decimal place. And so I am going to add a 0 here so that I have the same number of digits after each decimal place. And remember that it's fine, it does not change the number, to add a 0 to the end of a number to the right of the decimal point. So then I just go through and I do my subtraction. So starting over here on my right hand side, 1 minus 0 is 1. 6 minus 2 is 4. 8 minus 1 is 7. 1 away from 2 is 1. And so my answer, make sure you remember your decimal point. My answer to 2.861 minus 1.12 equals 1.741. We can also subtract decimals using their fraction equivalent. This isn't a very common method, but it does show the relationship between decimals and fractions. So let's take a look at it using our previous example of 0.8 minus 0.2. I could convert this decimal problem to a fractional problem and look at 0.8 as 8/10 minus 0.2, which is 2/10. And since these have a common denominator, I can simply subtract their two numerators. 8 minus 2 equals 6, and I keep their common denominator the same, so tenths. So 8 tenths minus 2 tenths equals 6 tenths in fraction form, which then 6 tenths can be converted back to decimal form as 0.6. And the answer to my problem here then is 0.6. So you can see here the relationship between the decimals and the fractions. Now let's take a look at the problem we started with at the beginning with Carlos and Sammy running the race. We want to find out how much extra time it took Sammy to finish the race. And so we need to subtract Carlos's time from Sammy's time. So we've set this up vertically, lined up our decimal points, and we want to remember that in our answer, the decimal point is going to be in the same place, and then we go about doing our subtraction. So 3 away from 2, I need to borrow 1 here, so I'm going to make this 20 and 19, and 12 minus 3, or 3 away from 12 now is 9, 8 away from 9 is 1, 6 away from 1 I can't do, so I need to borrow 1 again here, make this 9 and 8. 6 away from 11 is 5, and 6 away from 8 is 2. So 9.202 minus 6.683 equals 2.519.